The emergency beacon screamed across the void of space, its desperate pulse cutting through the cosmic silence like a dying heartbeat. On the bridge of the Galactic Council's flagship, Harmony, Admiral Zextar's 4 eyes widened in disbelief as the translation matrix finally decoded the ancient frequency. "Admiral," whispered Communications Officer Velra, her crystalline voice trembling. "The signal. It's coming from the Sol system." A collective gasp echoed through the bridge. Sol, the forbidden zone, the graveyard of the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. Zextar's scaled hands gripped the command console as memories flooded back, stories passed down through generations, warnings carved into the very foundations of galactic law. The humans. The Deathworlders who had vanished 3,000 years ago, leaving behind only radiation and ruin. "That's impossible," growled Captain Tholvan from his position at Tactical. The massive Kriegian's tusks gleamed under the bridge lights. "The Sol system has been dead since the Great Cleansing. Nothing could survive there." But the beacon continued its haunting call, and with each pulse the message became clearer. Not just a distress signal, a warning. Something was coming. Something that would make their ancient fears of humanity seem like children's nightmares. Velra's tentacles danced over her console, her bioluminescent patches flickering in rapid patterns of concentration. "Admiral, I'm picking up massive energy signatures throughout the outer rim. Unknown vessels moving faster than anything in our databases." "How fast?" Zextar demanded. 17 times light speed, sir. And accelerating." The bridge fell silent. Even the most advanced Council ships could barely manage 12 times light speed. Whatever was out there possessed technology that shouldn't exist. "Sir," Velra's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The energy signatures, they match theoretical calculations for human propulsion systems from the old archives." Zextar felt his primary heart skip a beat. The humans were supposed to be extinct. Dead. Gone. The Council had made sure of that when they glassed Earth and its colonies, fearing what those savage Deathworlders might become if left unchecked. "Bring up the historical files," he ordered, his voice steady despite the terror building in his chest. "Everything we have on human capabilities." The main screen flickered to life, displaying grainy footage from millennia past. Humans in primitive spacesuits, working with tools that seemed impossibly crude. But Zextar knew the truth behind those images. He'd studied the classified reports, read the accounts of survivors from the human wars. Humans didn't just fight. They fought with a fury that defied logic. They turned every battle into a desperate last stand, every defeat into a Pyrrhic victory for their enemies. They were unpredictable, relentless, and absolutely terrifying in their refusal to accept the impossible. "Admiral," Tholvan's voice cut through his thoughts. "We're receiving another transmission. This one's different." The static cleared, and a voice emerged, rough, unfamiliar, speaking in the ancient human tongue that the translation matrix struggled to parse. But the meaning came through with crystal clarity. "To all Council ships in the Outer Rim, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Reclamation Fleet. We know you're out there. We know what you did to our worlds. But that's not why we're here." The transmission crackled with interference, but the voice continued, growing stronger and more urgent. "Something followed us back from the dark between galaxies. Something that makes your worst fears about us look like a pleasant dream. We're sending you our fleet positions and defensive capabilities. You're going to need them." The bridge erupted in chaos. Officers shouted reports over each other. Warning lights flashed, and somewhere in the distance alarms began to wail. But Zextar heard none of it. His attention was fixed on the data streaming across his personal display. Ship configurations, weapon specifications, and crew manifests that shouldn't exist. The humans hadn't just survived their exile to the dark between galaxies. They'd thrived, and they'd brought back technology that would reshape everything the Council thought they knew about warfare. "Sir!" Velra's panicked cry cut through the noise. "Long-range sensors are detecting something massive approaching from extragalactic space. Whatever it is, it's huge. Bigger than anything we've ever seen." Zextar's blood ran cold as he stared at the sensor readings. The object was the size of a small moon, moving at impossible speeds, and it was heading straight for the heart of Council space. "Get me a direct line to the human fleet," he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "And prepare all ships for immediate combat readiness." As the bridge crew scrambled to comply, Zextar couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The humans were back. And despite every instinct screaming at him to run, to hide, to do anything but trust the species they'd tried to exterminate, he knew they might be the only thing standing between the galaxy and something far worse than death. The transmission opened and Captain Chen's voice filled the bridge once more, but this time her words chilled him to the bone. "Admiral Zextar, we don't have time for your fear or your guilt. The Devourers are 12 hours out from your core worlds and they're hungry. We can save your people, but only if you're willing to put aside 3,000 years of hatred and fight alongside the monsters you created." Chapter 2. Ghosts of the Void. The human fleet materialized out of hyperspace like phantoms emerging from a nightmare. Admiral Zextar watched in stunned silence as ships unlike anything in Council records took formation around his battle group. They were sleek and predatory, their hulls a matte black that seemed to absorb starlight itself. "My God," whispered Science Officer Krelan, her feathered crest rising in alarm. "Admiral, these vessels, they're not just using advanced technology. They're using technology that shouldn't be possible." Captain Sarah Chen's image flickered to life on the main screen. She was smaller than Zextar had expected. Humans always were. But there was something in her dark eyes that made his scales itch with primal fear. She looked like she'd seen things that would break most beings' minds. "Admiral," Chen said without preamble, "we don't have time for pleasantries. The Devourers will be here in 11 hours and 43 minutes. We need to evacuate the civilian populations from your core worlds and establish a defensive perimeter." "Captain Chen," Zextar began carefully, "with respect, the Council cannot simply—" "With respect, Admiral," Chen interrupted, her voice cutting like ice, "your Council glassed my homeworld and scattered my people to the void. But right now, that doesn't matter. What matters is that thing coming for all of us." The tactical display updated, showing the massive object hurtling toward them. Up close, it defied description. A writhing mass of organic tissue and metallic structures that pulsed with malevolent energy. "What exactly are we facing?" asked Captain Thalvin, his warrior's instincts overriding his distrust of humans. Chen's expression darkened. "We call them Devourers because that's what they do. They consume everything. Matter, energy, information, even thoughts and memories. We encountered them in the void between galaxies, where they'd already destroyed 17 different galactic clusters." She paused, and Zextar saw something flicker across her face. "Pain? Regret? They nearly got us too," she continued. We lost so many good people learning how to fight them, but we figured out their weakness." "Which is?" Zextar prompted. "They can't adapt to chaos. Their entire existence is based on consumption and assimilation of patterns. But humans—" Chen smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Humans are very good at being unpredictable." The Yao bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Everyone knew the stories about human unpredictability. It was what had made them so dangerous during the wars. Their refusal to follow logical tactical doctrine, their tendency to do the impossible when cornered. "Captain," Velra spoke up hesitantly, "our records indicate that human fleet strength, at the time of the cleansing, was fewer than 200 ships. Your current fleet registers over 3,000 vessels. How is that possible?" Chen's laugh was bitter. "You want to know what happened to us out there? In the dark between galaxies, we died. Most of us anyway, but the survivors, we learned things that would have been impossible if we'd stayed in the galaxy. We found ancient ruins, technologies from civilizations that fell long before yours even existed. We made contact with species so alien that your minds couldn't even process their existence." She gestured to something off-screen, and the tactical display showed detailed schematics of the human vessels. The technology was indeed beyond anything the Council possessed. weapons that could tear holes in space-time, shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, engines that didn't just exceed light speed, but seemed to sidestep the very concept of distance. We became something else out there, Chen continued quietly. Something harder. Something that could survive in the absolute void between galaxies, where even the quantum foam dies, and reality itself becomes negotiable. Zextar felt his blood chill. What had they unleashed by driving humanity into exile? What had they forced them to become? But we never forgot where we came from, Chen added, her voice softening slightly. We never forgot that this galaxy was our first home, even after you tried to burn it out of us. And when we detected the Devourers heading this way, we knew we had to come back. Why? The question escaped Zextar before he could stop it. Why save the ones who destroyed your worlds? Chen was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of millennia. Because that's what humans do, Admiral. We save people, even the ones who don't deserve it, even the ones who hate us for it. It's what makes us human. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. Velra's tentacles flew over her console, her bioluminescent patches strobing in panic. Admiral, the Devourer has accelerated. It's moving faster than our projections indicated. Time to intercept. 6 hours. Chen's image straightened. All business again. All right, Admiral. Time to see if your people can follow orders from a human. We're transmitting tactical deployment patterns now. Every ship in your fleet needs to take these positions exactly as specified. No deviations, no creative interpretations. The Devourers can predict logical tactical responses, but they can't predict human madness. The data flooded their systems. Deployment patterns that made no tactical sense, weapon configurations that violated every principle of space combat doctrine, and movement algorithms that seemed designed by someone who'd never studied military strategy. This is insane, muttered Tholivan, staring at his tactical display. These formations leave us completely exposed on our flanks. Good, Chen replied, apparently having heard him. Exposed flanks make the enemy overconfident, and overconfident enemies make mistakes. As the fleet began moving into position, Zextar couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to witness something unprecedented in galactic history. The humans were back, changed by their exile into something simultaneously familiar and alien. And they were about to face a threat that could end all life in the galaxy. Captain Chen, he said quietly, what aren't you telling us about these Devourers? Her image flickered, and for just a moment, he saw past her commander's mask to the exhausted, haunted woman beneath. They're not just destroyers, Admiral, they're collectors. Every species they consume, every mind they devour, it all becomes part of them, and they've been feeding for billions of years. The implication hit him like a physical blow. The Devourers weren't just a threat to be defeated. They were a repository of countless extinct civilizations, a living graveyard of galactic history. But there's something else, Chen continued, her voice barely above a whisper. Something we discovered too late to save the other galaxies. They don't just consume randomly, they're intelligent, and they're coming here for a specific reason. What reason? Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. They've been looking for us, Admiral. The humans. We're the only species they've ever encountered that they couldn't fully consume. And they want to know why. Chapter 3. The Art of Human War. The first wave hit like reality itself was tearing apart. The Devourer ship, if it could even be called a ship, emerged from hyperspace with a sound that shouldn't have been possible in the vacuum of space. It was a scream of tortured physics, a noise that bypassed the ears and struck directly at the soul. On the bridge of the Harmony, several crew members collapsed, blood streaming from their sensory organs. All ships, hold formation. Chen's voice cut through the chaos on the command channel. Remember, they're trying to make you panic. Panic makes you predictable. Zextar watched in horrified fascination as the Devourer began to change. What had appeared to be a massive spherical structure was unfolding like a flower made of nightmares, revealing layer upon layer of organic weaponry that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Admiral, Krelon gasped, her scientific instruments going haywire. The entity is generating localized spatial distortions. It's rewriting the laws of physics in a sphere around itself. Fire at will, Zextar commanded. The Council fleet opened up with everything they had. Plasma cannons, particle beams, antimatter torpedoes. All of it struck the Devourer's surface and simply disappeared. Not absorbed, not deflected. Gone, as if it had never existed. "Our weapons are having no effect," reported Captain Tholvin from his battlecruiser. "Hold your fire," Chen's voice came over the comm, calm as death itself. "You're feeding it energy. Everyone, execute pattern Omega-7. Now." The human fleet began to move in ways that defied military logic. Ships broke formation in seemingly random directions, some accelerating toward the Devourer, while others retreated at impossible angles. It looked like complete chaos. And then Zextar began to see the pattern beneath the madness. The humans weren't attacking the Devourer directly. They were creating a web of gravitational distortions using their exotic matter drives, pulling space-time itself into knots around the creature. It was like watching someone weave reality itself into a trap. "Fascinating." Chen's voice carried a hint of grim satisfaction. "It's trying to adapt to our attack pattern, but it can't. Every time it thinks it understands what we're doing, we change the rules." The Devourer's response was swift and terrible. Tendrils of living darkness shot out from its surface, each one the size of a capital ship. Where they touched Council vessels, the ships simply ceased, not destroyed but unmade, as if they had never existed at all. "Evasive maneuvers," Zextar shouted, but it was too late. 3 of his frigates winked. "Out of existence, all Council ships implement the human formations," Chen commanded. "Stop trying to fight this thing like it's a normal enemy, it's not." Reluctantly, Zextar gave the order. His fleet began to copy the seemingly chaotic movements of the human ships, and immediately he noticed a difference. The Devourer's tendrils began missing their target, striking empty space where logic said the ships should have been. "How is this possible?" he asked over a private channel to Chen. "Because you're not thinking like prey anymore," she replied. "You're thinking like a predator. The Devourer has consumed countless species, but they were all logical, predictable. They fought the way military doctrine says you should fight. But humans..." She paused, as her ship executed an impossible turn that should have torn it apart. "Humans fight like we're already dead, like we have nothing left to lose." The battle raged for what felt like hours but could only have been minutes. The human fleet danced around the Devourer like angry wasps, never staying in one place long enough to be caught, always moving in patterns that made no sense until suddenly they did. And slowly, impossibly, the Devourer began to show signs of distress. Its bioluminescent patterns flickered erratically and its tendrils moved more slowly as if confused. "It's working," Chen breathed. "We're actually confusing the damn thing." But victory was short-lived. The Devourer suddenly contracted, pulling all its tendrils back into its central mass. For a moment, the battlefield was eerily quiet. Then it began to sing. The sound was indescribable, not heard but felt, a vibration that resonated through hull plating and bone alike. And with that song came knowledge, terrible and ancient. Images flooded every mind in the fleet. Galaxies consumed, species extinct, civilizations that had fought with courage and intelligence and been devoured anyway. The weight of billions of years of death pressed down on them like a physical force. Several Council ships immediately broke formation and fled. Zextar couldn't blame them. The psychic assault was overwhelming, showing them the futility of resistance, the inevitability of consumption. But the human ships held their positions. All Council vessels still in formation. Chen's voice came over the comm, strained but unbroken. "Focus on my voice. The song is just another weapon, don't let it in." "How are you resisting it?" Zextar managed to ask, fighting against the despair that threatened to drown him. "Because we've heard worse," Chen replied simply. "We've lived in the void between galaxies for 3,000 years, Admiral. We've heard the screams of dead universes and the whispers of things that should never have existed. This is just another Tuesday for us. The Devourer's song reached a crescendo, and something new began to emerge from its surface. Smaller ships, if they could be called ships, that looked like twisted amalgamations of every species it had consumed. Council vessels, human designs and technologies from races that had died before the galaxy was young. It's using our own designs against us, Tholvin observed grimly. Then we'll just have to be better than ourselves, Chen replied. All ships, initiate Protocol 77 Alpha. What's Protocol 77 Alpha? Zextar asked. Chen's laugh was sharp and wild. Something we learned from a species called the Maddeners, about 2 galaxies over. You're not going to like it. The human ships began to glow with an eerie light, and suddenly their movements became even more erratic. But now there was something else, something that hurt to look at directly, as if the ships were occupying multiple positions simultaneously. We're existing in parallel quantum states, Chen explained, her voice distorting strangely. The Devourer can consume matter and energy, even thoughts and memories, but it can't consume possibility itself. The battle became surreal. Human ships flickered in and out of existence, attacking from angles that didn't exist in normal space-time. The Devourer's spawn found themselves fighting enemies that were simultaneously there and not there, real and unreal. But the strain was enormous. Zextar could hear it in Chen's voice as she coordinated the impossible attack. The humans were pushing their technology and themselves beyond safe limits. Chen, he said urgently, your ships are destabilizing, pull back. Can't do that, Admiral, she replied, her voice now echoing strangely across multiple dimensions. We're committed now. Either we win this, or we take the Devourer down with us. And that's when Zextar understood the true horror of what the humans had become. They weren't just willing to sacrifice themselves to save the galaxy. They were eager to do it. 3,000 years of exile had taught them that the only thing worse than death was allowing evil to continue unchecked. The climax came suddenly. The human fleet, existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously, converged on the Devourer from every possible angle at once. The creature's defenses, designed to adapt to predictable attacks, simply couldn't cope with assaults that were both real and theoretical. For the first time in eons, the Devourer screamed in pain rather than hunger, but as its death cry echoed across space, Zextar realized something terrible. This was just the first wave. In the distance, sensors were detecting more objects approaching from intergalactic space. Dozens of them. Chen, he called urgently, but the human captain was already ahead of him. I know, Admiral, she said, her voice returning to normal as her ship stabilized back into single quantum states. We knew there would be more than one. The Devourers always hunt in packs. How many more? Chen's pause told him everything he needed to know. All of them, Admiral. Every Devourer that survived the consumption of 17 different galaxies. They're all coming here. How long do we have? 6 hours. Maybe less. Zextar stared at the tactical display, watching as his sensors painted an increasingly grim picture. Hundreds of massive objects were approaching from every direction, converging on their galaxy like a closing fist. Can we evacuate the core worlds? He asked desperately. There's nowhere to run, Admiral, Chen replied quietly. This is it. This is where we make our stand. Chapter 4, The Price of Victory. The war room aboard the Harmony had never hosted a gathering quite like this. Admiral Zextar sat across from Captain Chen, while holographic projections of fleet commanders from across the galaxy flickered. Around the circular table, humans, Arcani, Tholraki, Zeridian, and a dozen other species, all united by the approaching apocalypse. The situation is simple, Chen began, her image slightly distorted from quantum interference. We have 4 hours before the main Devourer fleet arrives. Based on our analysis of the first encounter, we estimate their combined force at approximately 400 ships. A collective intake of breath echoed through the room. The first Devourer had nearly overwhelmed their combined fleets, and it had been alone. However, Chen continued, we've learned something crucial from that battle. The Devourers aren't just individual entities, they're part of a hive mind. When we killed the first one, we temporarily disrupted their coordination network. Temporarily? Asked Fleet Commander Varthek of the Rimworlds Alliance. The disruption lasted approximately 3 hours, Chen confirmed. During that time, long-range sensors detected significant confusion in their formation patterns. They're vulnerable when isolated from the collective. Zextar leaned forward. What are you proposing? Chen's expression grew grim. We're going to split them up, force them to fight as individuals rather than as a coordinated swarm, and we're going to do it using the most dangerous weapon in human history. Which is? Ourselves. The hologram flickered as Chen activated a new display, showing ship schematics that made Zextar's blood run cold. The vessels looked like nothing, so much as bombs with engines attached. These are conversion ships, Chen explained. Each one contains a human crew of 50 volunteers and enough exotic matter to destabilize a small star. The plan is to distribute them throughout the enemy formation and detonate simultaneously. That's suicide, protested Captain Tholvin. Yes, Chen agreed simply. It is. The room fell silent. Finally, Admiral Zextar found his voice. How many ships? 250. The number hit the room like a physical blow. 12,500 human lives, offered up without hesitation to save species that had tried to exterminate them. Captain Chen, Zextar said carefully, surely there must be another way. Remote detonation, automated systems. Won't work, Chen interrupted. The exotic matter requires constant human neural interface to maintain stability, and the Devourers can detect and neutralize automated systems. It has to be crude. But why humans? Asked Commander Velra. Why not volunteers from other species? Chen's smile was sad and proud at the same time. Because we're the only ones crazy enough to think this plan might actually work. And we're the only ones with the neural architecture to interface with. This level of exotic matter without going instantly insane. She paused, looking around the room at the assembled commanders. 3,000 years ago, you exiled us because you were afraid of what we might become. You were right to be afraid. We became something harder, something more dangerous, something that could survive in the absolute void between galaxies. But we also became something else, something you never expected. What? Zextar asked quietly. We became your guardians. The tactical display updated, showing the approach vectors of the conversion ships. They would spread throughout the Devourer formation like seeds, each one carrying death and hope in equal measure. The detonation sequence will create localized, space-time fractures, Chen continued, her voice clinical now. This will isolate individual Devourers from the hive mind for approximately 47 minutes. During that window, they'll be vulnerable to conventional weapons. 47 minutes. To kill 400 Devourers, mused Commander Tholvin. Can it be done? It has to be done, Chen replied. Because if we fail, there won't be another chance. This is the last stand for our galaxy. Over the next 3 hours, the greatest fleet in galactic history took position. Ships from every member species of the Council, supported by human vessels, whose technology bordered on the incomprehensible. It was magnificent and terrifying, the last desperate gamble of an entire galaxy. Zextar found himself on a private channel with Chen as the final preparations were made. Captain, he said, I need to ask you something. Go ahead, Admiral. Why are you really doing this? The truth, not the noble speeches. Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of millennia. Because 3,000 years ago, you taught us a valuable lesson about the galaxy. You showed us that when fear overcomes reason, civilizations do terrible things to each other. You made us into monsters to justify your own monstrous actions. She paused, and Zextar could see her clearly now on the screen. A small, unremarkable human woman who carried the hopes of trillions. But monsters can choose what kind of monsters they want to be. And we chose to be the kind that protects innocent people even from other monsters. I'm sorry, Zextar said suddenly, for what we did to your people, for the fear that drove us to— Don't, Chen interrupted. Don't apologize now. Survive this and spend the rest of your lives making sure nothing like this happens again. That's the only apology we want. The final hour passed in tense preparation. The conversion ships took their positions throughout the approaching Devourer formation, their human crews knowing they were flying to their deaths. But their transmissions were filled not with despair, but with grim determination and dark humor. Conversion Ship 7 to Fleet Command, came one transmission. Just wanted to report that our coffee maker is broken. Figured we should mention it for the historical record. Conversion Ship 15 here, came another. Anyone want to place bets on which one of us makes the biggest explosion? This is Conversion Ship 1, came a familiar voice, Chen herself. All conversion ships, remember? Biggest explosion wins eternal bragging rights. May we all be magnificent bastards. The laughter that followed that transmission echoed across every ship in the fleet. The Devourers entered the galaxy's outer rim at precisely 1437 ship time. They came like a plague of darkness, their forms writhing with the consumed essence of countless species. Even at maximum magnification, they hurt to look at directly. All conversion ships, Chen's voice came over. The command channel. Initiate final approach. Remember, we detonate on my mark. Not before. Timing is everything. The next 20 minutes were the longest of Zextar's life. He watched on the tactical display as the tiny human ships threaded through the massive Devourer formation, avoiding detection through methods that violated several laws of physics. Each one carried 50 souls who would never see home again. All ships in position, Chen reported. Fleet Command, it's been an honor fighting alongside you. Take care of each other. Chen, wait, Zextar began, but she cut him off. Tell our people that we remembered who we were supposed to be. The detonations began as points of light, tiny stars being born and dying in the span of microseconds. But those brief flashes tore holes in reality itself, creating fractures in space-time that isolated each Devourer in its own pocket of twisted physics. The effect was immediate and devastating. The Devourers, suddenly cut off from their hive mind, began to convulse and thrash in apparent agony. Their coordinated formations dissolved into chaos as each creature found itself alone for the first time in eons. All ships engage at will, Zextar commanded. The greatest battle in galactic history began. Freed from the need to fight unpredictably, the Council fleets engaged the isolated Devourers with every weapon they possessed. The creatures, confused and vulnerable without their collective intelligence, fell one by one to concentrated fire. But the battle was far from one-sided. Even alone, each Devourer was still a formidable opponent. Ships were lost by the dozens as the creatures lashed out in desperate fury. The space around the galaxy's rim became a graveyard of twisted metal and exotic energy. The 47-minute window began to close, and nearly 200 Devourers had been destroyed. But over 200 still remained, and they were beginning to reconnect to their hive mind. All remaining ships, Zextar broadcast on all frequencies. Concentrate fire on the largest remaining targets. We need to maximize casualties before they regroup. The final assault was brutal and desperate. Ships pushed their weapons beyond safe limits, crews worked past exhaustion, and commanders made decisions that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. But slowly, inevitably, the tide began to turn. When the space-time fractures finally healed and the surviving Devourers reconnected to their hive mind, only 43 remained. Faced with the loss of over 90% of their force, they made a decision that surprised everyone. They retreated. The surviving Devourers fled back into intergalactic space, carrying with them the bitter taste of their first real defeat in billions of years. The galaxy was safe, at least for now, but the cost had been enormous. Nearly half of the Council fleet had been destroyed, and 12,500 humans had given their lives in the conversion ship assault. Admiral, came a weak transmission from the surviving human fleet. This is Commander Williams of the Human Reclamation Fleet. Captain Chen didn't make it out. Zextar closed his eyes. Sarah Chen, the woman who had saved them, all had chosen to personally lead the suicide mission that broke the Devourer formation. "Commander Williams," he said carefully, "what are your intentions now? Will you be returning to the Void?" There was a long pause before Williams replied, "No, Admiral, we're tired of the dark between galaxies. We'd like to come home if you'll have us." Rizia. Epilogue. The New Covenant. 5 years later. The memorial stood in the center of New Geneva Station, a massive structure of crystallized spacetime that captured and held light from across the galaxy. 12,500 names were inscribed within its faceted surface, each one glowing with soft inner fire. Admiral Zextar, now Grand Admiral of the Reformed Galactic Council, stood before the memorial with Commander Williams, who had since been promoted to Admiral of the Human Integration Fleet. Around them, beings from across the galaxy paid their respects to the humans who had died to save them all. "Do you think they knew?" Williams asked quietly. Chen and the others. "Do you think they knew that their sacrifice would change everything?" Zextar considered the question. In the 5 years since the Battle of the Rim, the galaxy had indeed changed dramatically. The old council, built on fear and control, had been replaced by a new alliance based on cooperation and mutual respect. Humans had been granted full citizenship and representation, along with access to the core worlds that had once been forbidden to them. More importantly, the galaxy had learned from its mistakes. The xenophobia and fear that had driven the original exile of humanity had been acknowledged and addressed. New protocols were in place to prevent such tragedies from happening again. "I think," Zextar said finally, "that Sarah Chen would be proud of what we've built. But I also think she'd tell us not to get too comfortable. The Devourers are still out there, regrouping, learning from their defeat. This isn't over." Williams nodded grimly. "The deep space monitoring stations have detected movement in the void between galaxies. They're coming back, probably with new strategies and new allies." "Then we'd better be ready for them," Zextar replied. "All of us, working together this time." As they watched, a group of young beings, human children playing with Arcani cubs and Tholraki hatchlings, ran past the memorial. They were the first generation born into the new galaxy, raised without the old prejudices and fears. "You know what I find interesting?" Williams mused. "We spent 3,000 years in exile, becoming something harder and more dangerous than we'd ever been. But in the end, the thing that saved us all wasn't our weapons or our technology." "What was it?" Zextar asked. Williams smiled, watching the children play. "It was our refusal to forget how to hope. Even in the darkest void between galaxies, we never stopped believing that things could be better." The memorial pulsed with inner light, and for just a moment Zextar could swear he heard Sarah Chen's voice carried on the stellar winds. "Take care of each other." A soft chime echoed through the station's speakers, signaling the end of the memorial service. But as the crowd began to disperse, Williams placed a hand on Zextar's arm. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Something we haven't told the council yet." Zextar felt his scales prickle with unease. "What is it?" Williams gestured toward the viewport, where the stars shimmered in the distance. "Our deep space. Reconnaissance ships have made contact with something in the void. Not Devourers, something else. Something that claims to have been fighting them for longer than our galaxy has existed. Another species? An alliance of species. Survivors from the 17 galaxies the Devourers consumed. They call themselves the Last Light Coalition, and they want to meet with us." Zextar stared out at the stars, contemplating the implications. The galaxy had just begun to heal from its encounter with the Devourers, and now they were facing the possibility of an even larger conflict, or perhaps, if they were fortunate, gaining powerful new allies. "When?" he asked. "They'll be here in 6 months." Their message was interesting. They said they'd been watching our battle with the Devourers, and they were impressed by our tactics. Specifically, they were impressed by human tactics. Williams paused, a wry smile crossing her face. "Apparently, we're not the only species that's learned to fight like we have nothing left to lose." The Coalition wants to learn from us, and they want to teach us what they've discovered about the Devourer's true nature. True nature? Admiral, William said, her voice dropping to a whisper. What if I told you that the Devourers aren't just mindless consumers? What if they're the corrupted remnants of the first civilization in the universe, a species that discovered the secret of immortality, but paid a price that drove them insane? Zextar felt his heart skip a beat. If that was true, then everything they thought they knew about their enemy was wrong. The Devourers weren't just destroyers. They were victims of their own ambition, cursed to consume everything they had once sought to protect. The Coalition believes there might be a way to cure them, Williams continued, to restore their original nature and end their eternal hunger. But it would require cooperation on a scale that's never been attempted, entire galaxies working together toward a single goal. As they stood before the memorial to the fallen, Zextar realized that Sarah Chen's sacrifice had been even more significant than they'd understood. She hadn't just saved one galaxy, she'd begun a chain of events that might ultimately save the universe itself. Then we'd better start preparing, he said finally. If there's a chance to end this cycle of destruction, we have to take it, no matter what it costs. Williams nodded, her gaze fixed on the crystallized memorial where 12,500 names continued to glow with inner fire. Chen always said that humans were good at doing the impossible when cornered. Maybe it's time to prove her right again. In the distance, stars wheeled in their ancient dance, and somewhere in the void between galaxies, ancient powers stirred. The next chapter of galactic history was about to begin, and at its heart would be the same truth that had saved them all. When faced with impossible odds, the only rational response was to do the impossible in return. The memorial pulsed one final time, as if in acknowledgement, and then settled into its eternal vigil, a reminder of sacrifice, hope, and the price of standing against the darkness. And in the depths of space, carried on quantum frequencies that spanned impossible distances, a message began its journey toward distant galaxies. This is Admiral Zextar of the Reformed Galactic Council, broadcasting to the Last Light Coalition. We received your transmission. We're ready to talk. And we're ready to fight. The response, when it came months later, would change everything once again. But that is a story for another day. For now, the galaxy was at peace, protected by the sacrifice of those who had refused to let darkness win. And in the children playing near the memorial, human and alien alike, lived the promise that such sacrifices would never be forgotten and never be in vain. The humans had come home, and with them they had brought hope.